What's up, Wombat Nostalgia? Dave here with a review of The Mandalorian Season 3, the latest entry in the flagship Star Wars series on Disney Plus. Wrapped up its third season last week, and I think most people are in agreement that this would be the least successful season of The Mandalorian. Definitely an underwhelming one in many regards. Not that there's not a lot of things to enjoy. I think there's a lot of things I liked about season 3, but it was definitely the most uneven, and ultimately the silver lining for me is that this was very clearly a means to an end type season from a storytelling and creative perspective. And I think that's both interesting in a meta sense, but detracts from the overall, product you're getting in the moment, which is the Mandalorian season 3 itself. So a mixed bag overall. I think it's a pretty lukewarm take, you know. Um, but yeah, I think what's crystallized for me, and I think for many, would be that Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau, their stewardship of the Mando verse, the Star Wars Disney Plus sequel trilogy era storytelling mechanism we have here between the Mandalorian, the Book of Boba Fett, the forthcoming Ahsoka, and even Star Wars: The Bad Batch. These entries in Star Wars storytelling that we're getting, these are setting out to kind of color in Star Wars lore, connect pieces of Star Wars storytelling to one another. Specifically, Mandalorian and Ahsoka, especially Mando right now, we're concerned with the sequel trilogy and tying into The Force Awakens. That gap between Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens, that is being filled by The Mandalorian, and specifically what's happening here is storytelling sins of the sequel trilogy are being righted, corrected, smoothed over on Disney Plus with these series. And I think that's a really interesting thing to do because I think, overall reception to the sequel trilogy in the years since its conclusion obviously is very mixed, very polarized. We don't have to get into that. But the idea to perhaps increase people's perception of those by help filling in the gaps is quite interesting to me. It's very similar, I guess, to how the Clone Wars really colored things in between Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith, and really uh, rounded out the Anakin Skywalker character. It's not a new concept to us Star Wars fans. This premise of retroactively fixing something with futures, with more additional storytelling and additional time. Uh, in this case, I think we got a lot of Mandalorian season 3 was, especially towards the end there, right? Seeing the Imperial Shadow Council, seeing the Imperial Revenant, seeing Hux's dad, seeing Palelion back in canon in live action, acknowledgments of Throne, but also early in the season, seeing the New Republic in its early days, seeing that bureaucratic uh, dirge, that the slowness of its effectiveness, right? We're seeing how the First Order came to be, how it somehow came to exist in the galaxy, and how the New Republic wasn't able to stop it. We haven't seen all of that yet. We've only seen just a bit. But I think between future Mandalorian seasons, now the Mandalorian movie, where we know we're going to be getting directed by Dave Filoni, that'll be concluding all of these shows on the big screen in the years to come. It's kind of clear that's our mission, and I think it's kind of cool. I mean, if we're taking place, storytelling's taking place during this time where we know what happens in the future. It's the sequel trilogy. We've already seen that. We know what's going to happen. So the fact that this can at least color some stuff in and make some things more coherent, it's kind of cool, I suppose. We had that episode, which was I think a big departure from the Mandalorian storytelling form. The episode on Coruscant primarily, where we're with Dr. Pershing, call back to previous season, but really spending time with the New Republic and how things, uh, the bureaucracy of reintegrating people that previously worked for the Empire, how things like that went. But also, again, direct ties to Palpatine's uh, pursuit of cloning. We're seeing that on the Bad Batch. We're seeing that on this series. We know where that leads with Rise of Skywalker for good and bad, right? Moff Gideon, again, he's all about the cloning, and the splicing of things. We're getting the ties into the Strandcast and the Snoke of it all. We're filling all of that in, and it's it's interesting to me, but I don't know how interesting it is to the average viewer. And I think what's the other issue I think with Mandalorian season 3 is that if you're not into it for this like hardcore like lore dump and lore exposition and lore recontextualization that's going on from Filoni for years now, then you're probably invested in the core appeal of the Mandalorian, which is the story of Din Djarin and Grogu. And the thing with season 3 is that for really the first time, we took a step back in many instances from that core story of Grogu and Din. Spent a lot of time with the other Mandalorians and the mission and quest of Bo-Katan, right? And I think what's ultimately happened, at least on live screen, is that the storytelling regarding the Mandalorians as a culture, as a displaced people, and their pursuit of retaking their home world and finding their place in the world, it just hasn't manifested in the most interesting storytelling to me. I don't really vibe with the Mandalorians nearly as much as I was expecting to. I think a big part of that is a lot of them are still kind of unnamed characters. A lot of them are just ciphers. Even someone who has an awesome death scene in the penultimate episode in Paz Vizsla, like Paz wasn't really much of a character. We learned he had a son earlier in the season, and that was a great episode as a one-off episode. That was awesome. Uh, Shout out Ragnar. But the Mandalorians as a people, they're just kind of stick in the mud more often than not, right? The armor, she's cool, talks in platitudes, a lot of things we like about Star Wars, of course, but they're often just kind of buzzkills to me. This is the way. It's just a bit annoying at times, never taking off your helmet. It's not fun to never see anyone's face. But more than anything, like I don't know, like I just like I said, like I think this is a means to an end season. I'm kind of happy that like we've had the Mandalorian stuff pushed forward now, and those people will be on the show, be a component of the show, but that core conflict has at least a bit passed on. At least Din and Grogu's connection to it has passed on. Their characters are now in a really great place moving forward, even if it was a bit of a slog to get to this point. And yeah, I don't know. Like I think ultimately, like the quest for the dark saber and that mantle as the leader of Mandalore just wasn't as fun as I was expecting it to be. You know, Mandalorians are very interesting in Legends canon. Obviously, it's very different from what it is now. Um, it's just I don't know. It's just kind of it's a bit of a different fight, and the dark saber kind of being destroyed in the finale, or definitely being destroyed. Broken and then nuked basically. Kind of cool. Take it off the board. Like who cares? Move on. I like it. Um, yeah, I think like moment to moment, there's tons of great stuff. I think it's a really great Grogu season, especially in the second half. Grogu, of course, is a less is more character. You have the immense cuteness of the Baby Yoda ish. Like it just Grogu is fun and cute, and we love looking at him. And having Grogu be like super OP all the time as this incredibly powerful, desirable Force user, right? They have to pick their spots. I think they picked their spots pretty well, right? Like when Grogu's flipping around against the Praetorians, it was awesome. When he has the Mandalorian child duel with the paintballs, that was really fun. So then when you get to the point where you have the finale, right, where there's immense strength, immense power usage from Grogu saving Din and Bo in the process, I think it pays off. It feels good, but he's definitely less as more character. I like the way they brought in IG-11 this season in the beginning, both as Din requesting like a droid that he can count on to go to Mandalore, but then later on paying that off with IG-11 technically being a vessel for Grogu to walk around in, paying way to some excellent Mandalorian humor with Grogu being able to button mash yes and no commands, very reminiscent of a young child, right? When they learn to say no, that's all they say. Hilarious stuff. Like again, like I think Grogu, like the humor bits, the cute bits, it's like really like no perfect. That they just have an absolute like weapon when it comes to winning you over with stuff, right? Um, I guess like like an issue for me was like IG-11, right? Like Din needs him to go to the waters of Mandalore. But then like the immediate next episode, he goes all the way down there and finds the waters and, dips his head and renews himself. Like there's just like no build up to it. That was a bit disappointing to me. Also, like it's anticlimactic that Din is able to, on a technicality, hand the dark saber mantle back to Bo-Katan without any bloodshed. It's a bit disappointing to me. On the other hand, Moff Gideon only coming back in the second half of this season, still a really effective return. His obsession with kind of fucking up the Mandalorians for his pride, really fun. And I mean, I mentioned the Praetorians versus Paz, but Paz's sacrifice is absolutely epic. I think the penultimate episode's a huge, huge W for sure. A lot was made about the episode with Jack Black and Lizzo, which the cameos aside, the episode didn't really bother me all that much. And I think if the episode was a bit more congruent with the overall storytelling, wouldn't be that big a deal. I think the issue was that the plot felt a bit aimless, especially for Grogu and Din specifically, like episode to episode. I think if that was a bit more engaging as a season arc, you wouldn't really care that you happen to see Lizzo and Jack Black for 30 minutes. Like, that wasn't that big a deal, technically. Um, of course, early on in the season, we get the Order 66 flashback, learning how Grogu escaped the temple when things went down. And above all else, or against all odds, it was Kaleran Beck, deep cut, Ahmad Best returning to Star Wars in live action. Obviously, I think that's an amazingly kind gesture from Lucasfilm to bring Ahmad Best back in such an epic and fun way. Of course, Ahmad Best played Jar Jar Binks in the prequel trilogy, and Best went through a lot during that time, contemplating suicide at one point, a lot of abuse, and really a difficult thing. And the fact that he was able to be welcomed back with open arms, and I think really move forward as a person, I think is really awesome. And he had an absolutely epic scene. We know he doesn't die. Grogu obviously escapes, so there's could be more flashbacks in the seasons to come. Obviously, anything in and around Order 66 or Revenge of the Sith is crack for Star Wars fans, so we'll eagerly anticipating that with season 4 whenever we get any more breadcrumbs about that. But shout out Claren Beck, shout out Amon Best. That was absolutely epic watching him dual wield and fuck up some troopers. We love it. Um, yeah, I think I don't know. Like overall, I'm feeling real good about Ahsoka. They tease you with Thrawn at the end there. We know we're getting there. And the Ahsoka trailer looked really good. So, in a sense, this felt like a Mandalorian season that kind of had small aims, in terms of narrative accomplishments, where like the next big piece of juice seems to be with Ahsoka. So, uh, bit disappointing, but we know. I think I feel overall pretty happy with the prospect now that we know that Ahsoka and any potential second or third season of Ahsoka to come, as well as future Mandalorian seasons, we know we're going to be building up to this Mandalorian fill, and it seems pretty clear that Grand Admiral Thrawn will be like that big bad in a certain sense. So I think this has a lot of potential to really wrap up in a really satisfying way in the years to come. So this hopefully will just feel like a speed bump, but at least you can kind of see the plan, see the board for what it is to this point. But season 3 on itself, a disappointing note, but not all bad. Let me know, how are you feeling about Mandalorian season 3? How are you feeling about Ahsoka and Skeleton Crew and Acolyte and all the other Star Wars things we're getting to come? Check out my discussion about all the movies that got announced at Celebration a few weeks back. And for more TV reviews, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.